Hey guys, it's your girl I.am.Tiffanee. All right, so day 2 of Tiffany's book club, reading the book The Celestine Prophecy. Yes, spiritual journey, helping you throughout your spiritual journey. Hello there, are you joining me in my book club? Okay, so if you haven't already, purchase this book either to download or to order you a paperback. Either way, get the book. Even if you get the paperback, especially if you get it through Amazon, it will let you start reading it. I don't know how far it will go. I did read the first chapter last night, so I don't know how far it goes because I know I started reading after I purchased it online. It's just I got the book the next day. I didn't have to keep reading, online. So, anyways, so every day I do a oracle reading for me. And yesterday I had the same card. Today I got it again. The Warrior Woman. Have you answered your deepest calling? And for the fact that I got this yesterday, and yesterday's when I started my book club, started the reading, I just realized clearly this is my calling. Spirit asks, have you answered your deepest calling? So I'm glad I'm doing this. I don't care. I'm doing this because I want to do this. I'm not doing this for views, for readings, for popularity, for anything else or whatever. I'm doing this because this is a book that will help everybody. I've already experienced all of these, but for the fact reading it brings everything to clarity. It made me realize that everything I have experienced is part of my spiritual journey. It is part of my spiritual awakening and enlightenment, and that I have raised my frequency, my energy, which it's obvious. I feel it, I sense it, I notice the big difference. But for the fact that many others have gone through the same thing for a long time, lets me know that I'm not alone. And I'm reading this to you to make you realize that you are not alone either. If you're going through the same things, the same type of situations, if you're going through experience in your life and you feel all alone, you feel in the dark, you're feeling lost, this is where I come in. This is why I do what I do. This is why I do tarot readings, intuitive readings, and this is why I started my book club. It's because to let you know that you are not alone, and I'm here to help you. These books are here to help you, guide you throughout your journey. Okay? Okay, so chapter 2. The Longer Now. Let's make sure you can see. After a frenzy of packing, so recap. So chapter 1 is this guy, which he never says his name, so I'm guessing the main character in this book is the author, because he never introduces himself that I can recall. Luckily, I've already read this book, and since I'm rereading it, maybe I'll come across his name, the main character's name. But if it's not, then I guess it's the author, the writer, James Redfield. But okay, so the first chapter, the main character, this a friend of his that he hasn't seen in 6 years, haven't seen, talked to her, anything in years, hits him up out of the blue and lets him know that she's in layover and she's stopping in his town, and asks if they can link up for a couple hours. They link up. She tells him about the experience she just experienced in Peru, where she comes across a manuscript. A priest tells her about this manuscript, where it's a manuscript that was written in 600 BC that foretells a prophecy that starts happening decades before the 20th century. And I guess obviously that's around this time. And she tells him the first insight is about what was the first insight? There's 9 insights in this manuscript, where it's each level that people will reach, or that will unfold in people's lives to help them reach spiritual enlightenment. And it's gonna happen in a mass, eventually everybody's gonna reach it. So the first insight is First insight occurs when we become conscious of the coincidences in our lives. Finally becoming conscious of what we're actually looking for, or what this other what hold on. We're finally becoming conscious of what we're actually looking for, of what this other more fulfilling experience really is. When we grasp it fully, we will finally attain the first insights. The first insight always surfaces unconsciously at first as a profound sense of restlessness. When you come a time in your life where you're feeling restless, like where you're tired, you are tired of the mundane, you are tired of how life has been, and you're ready for something better, something grander. Like, it's basically, you're basically saying you letting go and letting God. You're basically saying, like, I'm tired of how life been. I'm ready for something great. I'm ready for a new leaf of my life, or whatever. Turning a new leaf in your life. And when you do that, when you let go, let God, basically, that that is you opening up to the first insight. And with the first insight, coincidences, synchronicities will start happening in your life. Well, technically, it's always happened in your life. This is the time you are now starting becoming conscious and aware of these coincidences happening, and you finally start following them. Basically, your intuition. Start following your intuition. So that's basically the first insight. So now we're on the second chapter, which is going to bring about the second insight. Okay. After a frenzy of, and then we end the chapter. So his friend Charlene is telling him about how she just came from Peru, and she learned about this manuscript. The priest is telling her about the manuscript. She doesn't tell the main character any specific details. She didn't even know the priest's name. The priest didn't give her his name, because he says that they shouldn't even be talking about it. The government is trying to get a hold of this manuscript because they don't want it to be known, because they think the government with the church, they feel like this manuscript is going against the church, is going against the rules and regulation of humankind, or some bullshit like that. And so at the end of the chapter, Charlene was like, Charlene, his friend, tells him everything. And at first he was a skeptic. He's like, no, I don't know. Like, you telling me something that was written in 600 BC is foretelling a prophecy of what's going to happen in the 1900s, in the mid 1900s, or mid, like, 1960s, I believe it was, decades before the 20th century, but basically. And he's like, I don't know. But then when she's giving him examples, and then something happens around them to make him realize, like, damn, it might be true. Like, people getting tired of how life is not just one person going through, or one in a billion. A lot of people is reaching this feeling, and where they want something greater. And so when she leaves, he's thinking about it. He's like, oh no, I don't know. But then like, he's thinking about it, right? And then he goes to sleep. And because he was thinking about it, because he was entertaining the idea, the information that he received, he was entertaining it. He was putting energy behind it. And this is before he went to sleep. So he goes to sleep. He dreams about being lost in the forest. But not only is he lost, he's actually looking for something. He just don't know what he's looking for. And there's people around him that come to him, helping him find what he's looking for. And then he wakes up. And he remembers the whole dream. And he's like, what does that mean? And then next thing you know, he's like, you know what? Let's learn more about this manuscript and these insights. And he books a trip to Peru. Come to find out, the travel agent says, look, somebody canceled on the reservation. You got your whole flight and hotel. One left. If you can be here in 3 hours. Coincidence. Because if he wasn't meant to go, there would have been no flights. There was a booked flight. You know, no reservations, but one left. And it got canceled by somebody else. That's a coincidence. That's synchronicity. He's like, bet. So this is where we started the chapter 2. The longer now. After a frenzy of packing and a wild ride on the freeway, I arrived at the airport with just enough time to pick up my ticket and board the flight for Peru. As I walked into the plane's tail section and sat down in a window seat, fatigue swept over me. I thought about a nap, but when I stretched out and closed my eyes, I found I couldn't relax. I suddenly felt nervous and ambivalent about the trip. Was it crazy to depart with no preparation? Where would I go in Peru? To whom would I talk? Like he had no plans. Like this man just like, okay, I'm gonna go to Peru. No plans, don't know nobody, don't know nothing, don't know not nothing. Just going. Following his intuition. The confidence I had um the confidence I had experienced at the lake was quickly fading back into skepticism. Both the flight, both the first insight and the idea of a cultural transformation again seemed fanciful and unrealistic. And as I thought about it, the concept of a second insight seemed just as unlikely. How could I'm sorry. And as I thought about it, the concept of a second insight seemed just as unlikely. How could a new historical perspective institute our institute our perception of these coincidences and keep them conscious in the public mind? I stretched out further and took a deep breath. Maybe it would be a useless trip, I concluded. Just a quick run to Peru and back, a waste of money, perhaps, but no real harm done. The plane jerked forward and taxied out to the runway. I closed my eyes and felt a mild dizziness as the big jet reached the critical speed and lifted into a thick cloud cover. When we reached cruising altitude, I finally relaxed and drifted into sleep. 30 or 40 minutes later, a stretch of turbulence woke me up. Okay, keep in mind with that. A stretch of turbulence woke me up, and I decided to go to a restroom. Go to the restroom. That's he not even realizing, but that every I've always had this mentality of everything happens for a reason. I think in high school on my Letterman's jacket, I you know how I mean I don't know how it is nowadays, but when I was in school in high school, in your Letterman's jacket on the back you have your last name and underneath you'll put like a quote or whatever you want to put underneath, right? I put either I put it is what it is or everything happens for a reason, which is basically kind of the same thing. I believe. At least that's how I meant. So, I think somebody text me. Okay, so he was woken up by turbulence, right? And he decides to go to the restroom. As I made my way through the lounge area, I noticed a tall man with round glasses standing near the window talking to a flight attendant. He glanced at me briefly, then continued speaking. He had dark brown hair and appeared to be about 45 years old. For an instant, I thought I recognized him. For an instant, I thought I recognized him. I feel like I should outline these things because these little things, these little occurrences, these little jolts, distractions, those are coincidences, and even when you don't even realize. So it goes from drifted off into sleep, a stretch of turbulence that woke me up. He decided to go to the restroom. Which, when you first read it, you're not understanding, but when you read it all and you come back again, you'll understand how important that is, or why that's important. Okay, so he made his way through the lounge area, noticed a tall man with round glasses standing near the window talking to a flight attendant. He glanced at me briefly, then continued speaking. He had dark brown hair and appeared to be about 45 years old. For an instant, I thought I recognized him. But after looking at his features closely, I concluded he was no one I knew. As I walked past, I could hear part of the conversation. Thanks anyways, the man said. I just thought since you traveled to Peru so often that perhaps you had heard something about the manuscript. He turned away and walked toward the front of the plane. I was dumbstruck. Was he speaking of the same manuscript? I walked into the restroom and tried to decide what to do. Now that's why I said highlight those particular instances, even though it don't seem like it's important, but keep going and you realize, like, hold on. If there was no turbulence, he would have slept for a while, probably maybe the whole trip. With the turbulence, we woke him up. Then he decides to go to the bathroom. You know, some people don't like to use public bathroom. You know, if you gotta pee, go pee in the toilet. Don't wait. Go. That could mean your body's telling you to do something, so something else can happen that's important. So he goes to the restroom. He notices somebody. He looks. He sees somebody. The person happens to glance at him at the same time. Like, that's that energy. Okay, for the fact they happen to lock eyes or glance at each other at the same time. Especially when the other guy was actually talking to somebody, right? Usually when you're talking to somebody, at least how you're supposed to do is keep your attention, your eyes on that person, right? Or whatever y'all talking about. Okay, so and then this the main character, the guy, he thought he recognized him. He looked familiar. Another instance where this stranger is putting a lot of attention and energy on this person. Okay, that's a sign, right? So so all of these coincidences regarding they happen to look at each other at the same time. Um, he looks familiar, and then so his attention's on this man, and then he happens to overhear the conversation, which the man is talking about the manuscript. The same reason why this character is going out to Peru for this manuscript. So you meet a complete stranger out of nowhere going after the same thing you're going after. And this manuscript is supposed to be kept a secret. So how does somebody else know? Okay. I was dumbstruck. He was speaking of the same manuscript. I walked into the restroom and tried to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to forget about it. Don't doubt. Don't ignore. Probably he was talking about something else, some other book. That's doubt. I returned to my seat and closed my eyes again. That's ignoring. Content to write off the incident. Glad I didn't have to ask the man what he meant. But as soon as I sat there, I thought about the excitement I had felt at the lake. What if this man actually had information about the manuscript? What might happen then? If I didn't inquire, I would never know. So instead of him being letting fear take over, letting doubt take over, letting or completely ignoring it, he's like, he asks questions. That's what you need to do every day. When you wake up, you're grateful for waking up, saying, oh, what you're grateful for, what you're appreciative for. You set intentions. What are you going to do for the day? Then you ask questions. Because when you ask questions to God, to the universe, throughout that day, you'll get them answers. You notice he's always asking questions, and when he asks questions, those questions get answered. Okay, so I'm going to outline just for the fact that he heard the guy say asking about the manuscript, he was dumbstruck. Part of him wanted to forget about it, and then putting doubt in his mind. Probably he was talking about something else, some other book. That's doubt. I really should put like notes to the side saying doubts, fear, ignoring. Returned to his seat and closed his eyes again, content to write off the incident. But as I sat there, he remembered about how excited he was, how excited he felt when he was at the lake where he was living at. So for the fact these thoughts are going and these feelings are going through his mind. So when you come across something, somebody, pay attention to your body. Pay attention to your emotions and your feelings. If you're feeling excited, if you're feeling happy, if you're feeling warm, continue with it. Go forward with it. If you're feeling anxious, scared, frightful, like your body's sweating, like your body's telling you, don't go no further. Stop. Listen to your body. That's your intuition also. Okay, so and then the man, like the character keeps, he's asking himself all these questions, like, but what if? At first he was skeptical. First he was doubting. He was fearful. He was like, let me ignore it. And then he's like, but what if? He's being optimistic about it. So now he's going forward with it. He says, if I didn't inquire, I would never know. I wavered several times in my mind. I wavered several times. Several more times in my mind, then stood up and walked toward the front of the plane, finding him about midway up the aisle. Directly behind him was an empty seat. Coincidence. There's an empty seat next to the man so that he can sit down and talk to him. That's a coincidence. That's a good sign. Follow the signs. Okay, there was an empty seat. Directly behind me was an empty seat. I walked back and told an attendant I wanted to move, then gathered my things and took the seats. After a few minutes, I tapped him on the shoulder. Excuse me, I said. I heard you mention as manuscripts. Were you speaking of the one found in Peru? He looked surprised and then cautious. Yes, I was. He said tentatively. I introduced myself. See, he never says his name. This is the first time he introduces himself to somebody. He doesn't mention his name. So I'm really believing that the main character is the author, James. Okay, so I introduced myself and explained that a friend had been in Peru recently and had informed me of the manuscript's existence. He visibly relaxed and introduced himself as Wayne Dobson. Okay, so the first person he runs into is Wayne Dobson, an assistant professor of history from New York University. As we spoke, I noticed a look of irritation coming from the gentleman sitting next to me. That's a sign. So this person that's sitting next to him, mind you, that seat was originally open. He noticed the guy sitting next to him was getting irritated. Anybody else would have been like, nigga, chill out. Fuck. Or, would have got irritated himself, or would have got mad, or would have ignored it. I noticed a look of irritation coming from the gentleman sitting next to me. He had leaned back in his seat and was attempting to sleep. And then, have you seen the manuscript? Asked the professor. Parts of it, he said. Have you? No, but my friend told me about the first insight. The man beside me changed his position. He's noticing this man next to him. Like, he's noticing this man is getting irritated. He's moving around, like, basically his body language telling him, bro, shut the fuck up, I'm trying to sleep. So anybody else, at least that, anybody else would have got irritated back. They would have matched energies. Okay. Dobson looked away. Excuse me, sir. Oh, Dobson looked his way. Excuse me, sir. I know we're disturbing you. Would it be too much trouble for you to exchange seats with me? See, instead of matching his energy of irritation, Dobson said, look, I understand that we're disturbing you. I apologize. Would you like to switch seats so I can talk to the gentleman? Don't match energy, especially when it's negative energy. That's important, obviously. And the man says, no. Okay, hold on. Dobson looked his way. Excuse me, sir. I know we're disturbing you. Would it be too much trouble for you to exchange seats with me? No, the man said. That would be preferable. We all stepped into the aisle. Then I slid back into the window seat, and Dobson sat next to me. Sat beside me. Look how that worked out. When you don't match negative energy, and you match when you approach negative energy or irritated energy with respect, empathy, compassion, the energy that was once negative, actually the negative energy reciprocates that positive energy, and it ended up being a positive situation when it could have been reversed if Dobson and James matched the other man's energy. That would have been both irritation, and it could have happened to a big fight, argument, or just negative energy. Don't feed negative energy with negative energy, okay? That's a lesson there. Okay, so Tell me what you heard concerning the first insight, Dobson said. I paused for a moment, trying to sum up in my mind what I understood. I guess the first insight is an awareness of mysterious occurrences that change one's life, the feeling that some other process is operating. Hmm. I felt absurd as I said it. Dobson picked up on the discomfort. What do you think about that insight? He said. I don't know, I said. It doesn't quite fit with our modern day common sense, does it? Wouldn't you feel better dismissing the whole idea and getting back to thinking about practical matters? I laughed and nodded affirmatively. Well, that's everybody's tendency. Okay, we'll read that part. It doesn't quite fit with our modern day common sense, does it? Wouldn't you feel better dismissing the whole idea and getting back to thinking about practical matters? Going back to the mundane, going back to the comfort zone. Well, that's everybody's tendency, even though we occasionally have clear insight that something more is going on in life. Our habitual way of thinking is to consider such ideas unknowable, and then to shrug off the awareness altogether. That's why the second insight is necessary. Once we see the historical background to our awareness, it seems more valid. Let me highlight that. Because when he asks about what would you do, and you're used to just shrugging it off, and going back to your comfort zone, and you realize your comfort zone is our habitual way of thinking, and that's why we're always continuing in a cycle. It's because when something new happens and when something is new is brought to our attention, to our consciousness, and we don't know nothing about it, it's unknown, we let doubt and fear and skepticism take over, and we ignore it. Well, we're not supposed to ignore it. We're supposed to acknowledge it and go forward with it. Because that insight, that consciousness, that intuition, that new knowledge is what's helping you move forward instead of keeping you in this repeated comfort ego cycle. Well, that's everyone's tendency. Even though we occasionally have the clear insight that something more is going on in life, our habitual way of thinking is to consider such ideas unknowable, then shrug off the awareness altogether. That's why the second insight is necessary. Once we see the historical background to our awareness, it seems more valid. I nodded. Then as and for the fact the first person that he meets when he first goes out to Peru on the airplane, haven't even reached Peru yet. The first person he meets is a history professor who knows about history. In order to help you with these insights, in order to help you with your spiritual journey and learning from the past, you gotta know the past. You gotta know the history. And someone asked me. Now this is a personal moment here. I've been through school. I went through school technically for like 3 years, 3.5 years. When it should have had lasted like 2 years, but because I was a single parent, I was going to school full time, working full time, and being a parent, single parent. Some semesters, I only took like a couple of classes, one class, three class. One semester I stopped only because I thought I was done. I did graduate, but I went back to school like 2 semesters later, realizing I needed to do two more classes. And then after I finally finished with all my classes, I realized and graduate again. I realized I don't even want to do this. And somebody asked me like, "But Tiffany, you spent all that time going to school, working towards something. You realize you don't want to do it. Don't you feel like that's wasted time?" I was like, "Nah." Because everything happens for a reason. Going to school not only stimulates my brain, my mental, but two, it brought structure in my life, instead of, because before, I'm not saying I was never structured, but before I was living life on the edge. I was just being carefree and careless. Going to school, spending 3.5 years in school kept me structured, disciplined, organized, focused, mental not mental stability, but mental stimulation. Okay? And plus, a lot of the things I've learned, the classes I had to take, some of the things actually fit into life. Like history class, I had to take quite a few times. Not the same class, but, different, two history classes. Because it's from one time period and then the other one was the other time period. Though I don't remember everything, I'm just saying, like, everything happens for a reason. Like, if I would have really studied everything and paid attention, I mean, a lot of it was pretty interesting, but, once that class was over, all of that was over out of my head. I pushed it out. But, like, you need to know your history so that you can not only not repeat history, or if it is repeating, you be aware of it, but two, so that you can see the evolution of humanity from history. Okay? Okay, I nodded. Then, as a historian, you think the manuscript's prediction of a global transformation is accurate? Yes, because really, when you look back in history from the dawn of time, from the start of humanity, hell, from the start of this country, everything has evolutionized. How not? Are we back in the caveman era? Are we back in the dinosaur era? Are we back in the Stone Age era? It was the same thing. Are we back in the slave era? Yeah, we are, but not that slave era. Are we back in the time where it was pilgrims and horse carriages, no vehicles, no electronics, nothing, no telephone? No. Life has evolved. Humanity has evolved since the beginning. So yes, as a historian, yes, but you have to look at history in the correct way. He took a deep breath. Believe me, I say this as one who has spent a lot of years studying and teaching history in the wrong way. Huh. I used to focus solely on the technical and the technical accomplishments of civilization and the great men who brought about this progress. What's wrong with that approach? Nothing as far as it goes, but that's really important in the worldview of each. Okay, hold on. Nothing as far as it goes, but what's really important in the worldview of each historical period? This is important. But what's really important in the worldview of each historical period? What the people were feeling and thinking. It took me a long time to understand that history is supposed to provide a knowledge of the longer context within which our lives take place. History is not just the evolution of technology, it is the evolution of thoughts. By understanding the reality of the people who came before us, we can see why we look at the world the way we do. What our contribution to is to under is and our contribution is toward further progress. We can pinpoint where we come in, so to speak, in the longer development of civilization, and that gives us a sense of where we are going. And that's why it's so important to really know the truth about history. Not truths that we learn in school, that's in the history books, because, it's one-sided. Not only is it one-sided, but it's not all truth. Some shit's made up. But how the governments, the higher-ups, the white people, how they made these history books, even the Bible, they set it to where there are people lesser than and there's people greater than. Certain peoples, which is not even all the way true. Talking about white people founded United States. No, it wasn't. Talking about Christopher Columbus was white or whatever. No, he wasn't. That he came out here to find the United States. No, that didn't happen. Like, there's so much history that is falsified that we need to know the truth so we can understand the evolution of thinking, the evolution of life, the evolution of humanity. And we can see and pinpoint at certain times and certain aspects so we can understand that life, that humanity, that the world, that existence really do really do evolutionize. Context, I'm starting to act up. Okay, so he paused, then added, "The effect of the second insight is to provide exactly this kind of historical perspective. The second, the effect of the second insight is to provide exactly this kind of historical perspective, at least from the point of view of the Western thought. It places the manuscript's predictions in a longer context that makes them seem not only plausible but invincible. Nope, inevitable. Sorry, I'm gonna reread that because I was outlining it. He paused and then added, "The effect of the second insight is to provide exactly this kind of hysterical perspective, at least from the point of view of Western thought. It places the manuscript's predictions in a longer context that makes them seem not only plausible, but inevitable. Evolution is inevitable. The predictions of this manuscript is inevitable because the manuscript is about basically all about evolution of a human, of humanity, of humankind." I asked Dobson how many insights he had seen, and he told me only the first two. Okay, so exactly. Coincidences, synchronicity. First guy that he meets outside of his friend Charlene, who even told him about this manuscript, the second person, or the first stranger he meets when he first goes onto his trip on the plane before he even reached Peru, first person he meets, comes across, coincidentally, is a historian who is informing him that he needs to know the history of humanity. Then two, the guy only knows the first two insights. So his friend tells him about the first insight, and then the first stranger he meets knows of the second insight. What a coincidence! And then for the fact he's learning the insights, this manuscript, insight at a time, in order. Coincidence, coincidence. And I wonder why we get that saying, coincidences is not real. Coincidences, I think not. Coincidences is real and true and good. Okay? That don't mean, oh, it's a coincidence, shrug it off. That that just happens. What you mean? That's a sign. That's a message. Okay. Sorry. I asked Dobson how many insights he's seen. He told me only the first two. He had found them, he said, after a rumor about the manuscript prompted a trip to Peru 3 weeks ago. Once I arrived in Peru, he continued, I met a couple of people who confirmed the manuscript's existence, yet seemed scared to death to talk about it. They said the government had gone a little loco and was making physical threats against anyone who had copies or dispersed information. His face turned serious. That made me nervous, but later a waiter at my hotel told me about a priest he knew who often spoke of the manuscript. The waiter said the priest was trying to fight the government's effort to suppress the artifacts. I couldn't resist going to a private dwelling where this priest supposedly spent most of his time. Okay, so this is Dobson, the stranger, hearing about these things, right? And he's putting thought behind what he heard, right? Okay, cool. He's entertaining that thought. He's entertaining that information. I must have looked surprised because Dobson asked, "What's wrong?" "My friend," I replied, "the one who told me about the manuscript, learned what she knew from a priest. He didn't give his name, but he talked with him but she talked with him once about the first insight. She was scheduled to meet him again, but he never showed up. It may have been the same man. It may have been the same man," Dobson said, "because I couldn't find him either. The house was locked up and looked deserted." You never saw him?" "No, but I decided to look around. There was an old storage building in the back that was open, and for some reason I decided to explore inside, following his intuition." Behind some trash under a loose board in the wall, I found translations of the first and second insight. Because he followed his intuition, he did not let fear take over, he did not let doubt take over, he did not let ignorance of ignoring take over. He followed his intuition. It got him some answers. He looked at me knowingly. You you just happened to find them? I asked. Yes. Did you bring the insights with you on this trip? He shook his head. No, I decided to study them thoroughly and then leave them with some with leave then leave them with some of my colleagues. Could you give me a summary of the second insight? I asked. There was a long pause. Then Dobson smiled and nodded. I guess that's why we're here. Coincidence. I guess that's why we're here. The second insight, he said, puts our current awareness into a longer historical perspective. After all, when the decade of the 90s is over, we'll be finishing up not only the 20th century, but a 1,000-year period of history as well. We'll be completing the entire second millennium. Before we in the West can understand where we are, what is going to occur next, we must understand what has really been happening during this current 1,000-year period. What does the manuscript say exactly? I asked. It says that at the close of the second millennium, that's now, we will be able to see that entire period of history as a whole, and we will identify a particular preoccupation that developed during the later half of the millennium in what has been called the modern age. Our awareness of the coincidences today represents a kind of awakening from this preoccupation. I'm going to reread that. What does the manuscript exactly say about the second insight? It says that at the close of the second millennium, that's now, because I guess when this book was read, or when this happened, was in the 1990s, end of 1990s, 1999, I guess, we will be able to see the entire period of history as a whole, and we will identify a particular preoccupation that developed during the later half of the millennium, in what has been called the modern age. Our awareness of the coincidences today represents a kind of awakening from this preoccupation. What's the preoccupation? I asked. He gave me a mischievous half smile. Are you ready to are you ready to relive the millennium? Sure, tell me about it. Okay, so now he's taking him to history class. It's not enough for me to tell you about it. Remember what I said before. To understand history, you must grasp. Okay. To understand history, you must grasp how our everyday view of the world developed, how it was created by the reality of the people who lived it before you. It took 1,000 years to evolve the modern way of looking at things, and to really understand where you are today, you must take yourself back to the year 1000 and then move forward through the entire millennium experientially, as though you actually lived through the whole period yourself in a single lifetime. So that's why history class is very important, and learning your own history is very important. Remember, read that. It's not enough for me to tell you about it. Remember what I said before. To understand history, you must grasp how your everyday view of the world developed, how it was created by the reality of the people who lived it before you. It took 1,000 years to evolve the modern way of looking at things, and to really understand where you are today, you must take yourself back to the year 1000 and then move forward through the entire millennium experimentally, as though you actually lived through the whole period yourself in a single lifetime. That's like time travel. You want to time travel? Go back to the year 1000 and experience that from the year 1000 up to now, and learn about and research what happened during that time. How do I do that? I'll guide you through it. I hesitated for a moment, glancing out the window at the land formation far below. Time was already beginning to feel different. I'll try, I said finally. Okay, he replied. Imagine yourself being. Okay. Imagine yourself being alive in the year 1000, in what we have called the Middle Ages. The first thing you must understand is that the reality of this time is going to is being defined by the powerful churchmen of the Christian Church. Because of their position, though these men hold great influence over the minds of the populace, and the world these churchmen describe as real is above all spiritual. They are creating a reality which places their idea about God's plan for mankind at the very center of life. Visualize this. You find yourself in the class of your father, essentially peasant or aristocrat. You know that you will always be confined to this class, but regardless of which class you're in or the particular work you do, you soon realize that this social position is secondary to the spiritual reality of life as defined by the churchmen. Life is about passing a spiritual test. This is how they were in the year 1000, which is so weird. Okay, life is about passing a spiritual test, you discover. The churchmen explain that God has placed mankind at the center of his universe, surrounded by the entire cosmos for one solitary purpose: to win or lose salvation. Like this is as they say when the Bible was created, or even before then. Well, I guess really before then. That life is about either win or lose salvation. Okay? Um, And in this trial, you must correctly choose between two opposing forces: the force of God and the lurking temptations of the devil. But understand that you don't face this contest alone, he continued. In fact, as a mere individual, you aren't qualified to determine your status in this regard. This is the province of the churchmen. They are there to interpret the scriptures and to tell you every step of the way whether you are in accordance with God or whether you are being duped by Satan. And if you follow their instructions, you are assured that uh, you are assured that a rewarding afterlife will follow. But if you fail to heed the course that they prescribe, then well, there is excommunication and a certain damnation. So at the beginning of time, around the year 1000, it was said, or it was believed, that only the churchmen, the holy men, could read scriptures from, I guess, the Bible or something, whatever they was reading scriptures from, probably the Bible or such, or as such. And only the churchmen, the holy men, could read these, and the churchmen and the holy men could basically tell you about your life. Either you're gonna do good or you're gonna do bad. Either you're gonna believe in God or be tempted by the devil. If you don't believe in God, or if you don't follow these commandments, these rules in this Bible, then you be damned to hell. You will not go into heaven. So that's how it started in regarding to spirituality, how it was written, and how they forced control over people, because that's what they had, nothing else to believe in. So they believed this. Dobson looked at me intensely. The manuscript says that the important thing to understand here is that every aspect of the medieval world is defined in other worldly terms. All the phenomena of life, from the chance thunderstorm or earthquake to the success of crops or the death of a loved one, is defined either as a will of God or as the malice of the devil. So any natural causes, the weather, um, death of your loved one, they're saying that's God doing it, or the devil doing it. Someone dying, unnatural causes or unexpectedly, that's the devil. Or thunderstorm that floods that's the devil, or earthquakes, that's the devil, I guess, or God getting mad, type of shit, you know. There is no concept of weather or geological forces or horticulture or disease. All the churchmen, the world you take for granted operates solely by spiritual means. So, beginning of time, or at least around 1000, nobody knew nothing. They needed to believe in something. So they had these holy men, these churchmen, who acted like, who seemed like they're the only ones who could read these scriptures, that they are the only ones who knew the word of God. They preached the word of God, and they said, if you don't follow these commandments, if you don't follow this Bible, you're going to hell. There's natural causes, the weather, the death, the sickness, the food, the crops are either growing or the crops is dying. That's either God praising you, blessing you, cursing you, or the devil. They didn't know no better. They didn't realize that's just natural shit. That's just how the earth goes. That's just part of life. You born, you live life, and then you die. If you don't nurture, feed your water, feed your crops, they're gonna die. Okay. He stopped talking. He stopped talking and looked at me. Are you there? Yes, I can see that reality. Well, imagine that reality now beginning to break down. What do you mean? The medieval worlds, your worldview begins to fall apart in the 14th and 15th centuries. First, you notice certain. First, you notice certain improprieties on the parts of the churchmen themselves, secretly violating their vows of chastity, for example, or taking gratuities to look the other way when the governmental officials violate scripture laws. So during the 14th and 15th centuries, people are realizing these churchmen, these holy men, aren't thou holy. They're not following the scriptures either. How are you following the scriptures when you fucking people getting married, having sex, child molesting these boys and these girls? You not holy. You ain't supposed to be fucking. Period. You taking money from government officials because they're doing wrong. You taking money from them so you can look the other way. You ain't holy, sir. Everything you saying is a lie. So during the medieval times, the Renaissance is when they're like, we ain't taking this shit. You lying. You was trying to control shit. You was trying to manipulate shit. You don't know everything, at least not a god. Okay, these improprieties alarm. I might be saying that wrong. These improprieties alarm you because these churchmen hold themselves to the only connection between yourself and God. Remember, they are the only interpreters of the scriptures, the sole arbitrators of your salvation. So if these are the only people who can read these scriptures, translate these scriptures, we are assuming that these are the only people, these are the only men who has the connection with God. And so of course you want to live up to God, because God is the creator of everything. God can make you or break you, right? So if my only connection to God is these churchmen, these holy men, I'm gonna follow what they say. But then during the 14th, 15th centuries, we're starting to realize these holy men ain't holy. Churchmen alarm you because these churchmen hold themselves to the only connection between yourself and God. Remember, they are the only interpreters of the scriptures, the sole arbitrators of your salvation. Suddenly, you are in the midst of an outright rebellion. A group led by Martin Luther is calling for a complete break of the papal Christianity. The churchmen are corrupt, they say, demanding an end to the churchmen's reign over the minds of the people. So Martin Luther, we need to give thanks to, because they helped us free us from the control and the reigns of the churchmen who thought they was the right hand of God when they was a motherfucking liar. Or at least not the only connection to God, rather. New churches are being formed based on the idea that each person should be able to have access to these scriptures personally and to interpret them as they wish with no middlemen. So I guess this is when the Bible was made, or at least handed out to everybody. As you watch and believe in disbelief, the rebellion succeeds. I don't know why I'm reading, outlining everything, but that's part of history, and it is helping you realize how spirituality, the evolution of spirituality, the evolution of humanity. The churchmen began to lose. For centuries, these men defined reality, and now before your eyes, they are losing their credibility. Consequently, the whole world is being thrown into question. The clear consensus about the nature of the universe and about humankind's purpose here, based as it was on the churchman's description, is collapsing, leaving you and all the other humans in Western culture in a very precarious place. So now people are lost. Like, what do we believe in now? We believed in this churchmen, these holy men, because we believed they was the only connection to God. Because we believed that they was the only ones that who can translate the scriptures of God. And then they realized that y'all should not be the only ones who has the access to the uh, scriptures of God. We need to know too. So translate them so we all can have access to it and we can all decide our own fate. After all, you have grown accustomed to having an authority in your life to define reality, and without that external direction you feel confused and lost. If the churchman's description of reality and the reason for human existence is wrong, you ask, then what is right? He paused for a moment. Do you see the impact of this collapse on people that day? So, like, evolution, people change, people's thought process change, people's consciousness change, people's spirituality change, people's mentality change, or the way they view things, anyways. I suppose it was something unsettling, I said. To say the least, he replied. There was a tremendous upheaval. People were waking up. The old worldview was being challenged everywhere. In fact, by the 1600s, astronomers had proved beyond a doubt that the sun and the stars did not revolve around the earth, as maintained by the church. Clearly, the earth was only one small planet orbiting a minor sun in a galaxy that contained billions of such stars. 16 So we start in the 1000, where it's only these holy men, these churchmen that can understand the word of God. Right? They're the only ones. So we have to believe what these churchmen says. And then we realize they are lies because they're not holy. Okay, so now what do we believe? Now in the 1600s, we come across astrologers who realize that everything does not revolve around the earth, meaning does not revolve around us. That in fact, the sun and the stars, or that the earth was only one aspect, one planet orbiting a sun in a galaxy that contained billions of such stars. He leaned towards me. This is important. Mankind has lost its place at the center of God's universe. See the effect this had? Now when you watch the weather or plants growing or someone suddenly die, what you feel is an anxious bafflement. What you feel is an anxious bafflement. In the past, you might have said God was responsible or the devil, but as the medieval worldview breaks down, that certainly goes with it. All the things you took for granted now need new definition, especially the nature of God and your relationship to God. Wow. Wow, now you start to question things. With that awareness, he went on, the modern age begins. So it's the ending of it's the ending of medieval times. The medieval times is when the holy men, the churchmen, they're thinking that everything revolves around us, the planet Earth, and we realize it's not. Mankind has lost its place at the center of God's universe. See that you see the effect this had? Now when you watch the weather or plants growing or someone suddenly die or what you feel is an anxious bafflement. In the past you might have said God was responsible or the devil. But as the medieval worldview breaks down, that certainty goes with it. All the things you took for granted now need new definition, especially the nature of God and your relationship to God. Doesn't believe you don't believe in God. It's just you're waking up and realizing what was said before is not all truth. It's not the reality. But you still believe in God. Okay? So those people who was born into religion and you grow up, become your own person, become an adult, hit a certain stage in your life, and you realize I don't have a connection with reality, with religion. I'm not vibing it with it. It's not making sense. And then you become spiritual because you still believe in God, right? Doesn't mean just because you're not religious anymore doesn't mean you're an atheist. Doesn't mean you don't believe in God. You just don't believe in religion. You're spiritual. Spirituality. With that awareness, he went on. The modern age begins. In the end of medieval times, modern age begins. This is a this is a growing democratic spirit and a mass distrust of papal and royal authority. Definitions of the universe based on speculation of speculation or spiritual faith are no longer automatically accepted. In spite of the loss of certainty, we didn't want to risk some new group controlling our reality, such as the churchmen had. If you had been there, you would have participated in the creation of a new mandate for science. So, okay, we're still dealing with people that feel like they need somebody to have control. They need a guide. They need a leader. These churchmen aren't the leader no more because they realize they're not the holy men. They're not the only soul connection to God. Now they're trying to find something else to be the leader, to something to believe in. A what? He laughed. You would have looked at You would have looked out on this vast, undefined universe, and you would have thought, as did the thinkers of that day, that we needed a method of consciousness. Okay, I'm getting tired. Fuck, it's already almost 10 o'clock. Okay, hold on. You would have looked out on this vast, undefined universe, and you would have thought, as did the thinkers of that day, that we needed a method of consensus building, a way to systematically explore this new world of ours. It's a new world. It's a new earth. What they're saying what's happening nowadays, we're growing into a new earth. Doesn't mean that this planet is gonna die and a new earth is gonna happen. It means the consciousness of the people is changing. The reality is changing because what we were living in the past is no longer. We are realizing that it was all false. It was all untrue. So a new earth, a new world is evolving right now in today's time, if you haven't noticed. Okay. You would have looked out at you would have looked out on this vast undefined universe and you would have thought, as the thinkers did of that day, that we needed a method of consensus building, a way to systematically explore this new world of ours. And you would have called this new way of discovering reality of the scientific method. So in the modern age, their thing now is the scientific method, which is nothing more than testing an idea about how the universe works, arriving at some conclusion, and then offering the conclusion to others to see if they agree. So with this modern age, is that their focus wasn't just on God or holy people, holy men that only had the connection with God, and realizing that the universe doesn't revolve around the earth, the Earth is just a part of the universe. Now these astronomers, these scientists are like, has created the scientific method. The scientific method is just really discovering something. What is the scientific method? A hypothesis, a thesis, an experiment, and a conclusion. Some shit like that, right? The scientific method. So you got these astronomers, these scientists discovering the universe and everything in it, and of this earth, doing experiments, testing it out, coming to the conclusion, thinking they find the answer, showing it to other scientists and other people. They test it out and they're like, dang, that might be true. And that's their belief system now. Then he continued, you would have prepared explorers to go out into this new universe, each armed with a scientific method, and you would have given them their historic mission. Explore this place and find out how it works and what it means that we find ourselves alive here. When did Christopher Columbus sailed out? I don't think it was the what time is this? This is the 1600s. I mean, might have been. You knew you had lost your certainty about God-ruled universe, and that because of that, your certainty about the nature of God Himself. But you felt you had a method, a consistent building process through which you could discover the nature of everything around you, including God, and including the true purpose of mankind's existence on this planet. So you sent these explorers out to find the true nature of your situation and to report back. So it's not about not believing in God or questioning God. Well, yeah. The modern age is about questioning God, questioning existence, period. So you got these scientists and these astronomers questioning everything. So that's kind of like, aren't we at that moment again in life right now, questioning everything? We're realizing everything we learned in school, everything the government has been telling us, it has all majority been a lie. So now we're questioning things. Now we got these billionaires building up their own spaceships so they can go out in space and see if it's all real, to see what's really out there and to see whatever else. We got these archaeologists and whatnot exploring historical artifacts to learn about history. You got these other explorers and scientists looking for aliens. Like, people are questioning what the government, what the people in the past has taught us, and realizing y'all been lying or y'all been keeping secrets. He paused and looked at me. The manuscript, he said, says that at this point we began the preoccupation from which we are awakening now. We sent these explorers out to bring back a complete explanation of our existence, but because of the complexity of the universe, they weren't able to return right away. What was the preoccupation? When did they claim that Neil Armstrong went into space? The first people went into space. I don't know what year that was. I don't doubt that's in 1600s. Fuck, I don't know. What was the preoccupation? Put yourself in that time period again, when the scientific method couldn't bring back a new picture of God and of mankind's purpose on this planet. The lack of certainty and meaning affected Western culture deeply. We needed something else to do until our questions were answered. Eventually, we arrived at what seemed to be a very logical solution. Because these astronomers and because these scientists couldn't find the exact answers of who God is, or what is the meaning of our existence, they just took the logical approach, the logical solution. We looked at each other and said, well, since our explorers have not yet returned with our true spiritual situation, why not settle into this new world of ours while we are waiting? Settle into a new world. We are certainly learning enough to manipulate this new world for our own benefit. So why not work in the meantime to raise our standards of living, our sense of security in this world, instead of waiting to find the answers of who really is God, what really is God in our existence. Let's just live and live to survive. And so they preoccupied themselves of just figuring shit out on their own. He looked at me and grins. And that's what we did 4 centuries ago. 4 centuries ago. Centuries is hundreds. That's 400 years ago. What happened 400 years ago? Let me keep reading. 4 centuries ago, we shook off our feeling of being lost by taking matters into our own hands, by focusing on conquering the earth and using its resources to better our situation. And only now, as our approach the end of the millennium, can we see what happened. Our focus gradually became a preoccupation. We totally lost ourselves in creating a secular security as and economic security to replace the spiritual one we had lost. The question of why we were alive, of what was actually going on here spiritually, was slowly pushed aside and repressed altogether. He looked at me intensely, then said, "Working to establish a more comfortable lifestyle of survival has grown to feel complete in and of itself as a reason to live, and we've gradually, methodically forgotten our original question. We've forgotten that we still don't know what we're surviving for." So, because they couldn't prove God, because they couldn't prove the reason of our existence, they just started making shit up. They just started manipulating things for their own benefit. And this is where that 1%, the 1%ers are still the 1%ers of this world. They're the controller of this world. Because they're the ones, their ancestors took it upon themselves to just make shit up. To manipulate resources, to manipulate people for their benefit. 400 years ago. And that's what we did. 4 centuries ago, we shook. So, not saying they stopped believing in God. They just put it in the back burner since they couldn't prove it. And just like, oh, we're just going to make some shit up. We shook off our feeling of being lost by taking matters into our own hands. By focusing on conquering the earth and by focusing on conquering the earth and using its resources to better our situation, and only now, as I just ate and I need to stop just eating and then reading because I feel like I want to throw it up. Not that I'm sick, it's just I don't know. And only now, as we approach the end of the millennium, can we see what happened. Our focus gradually became a preoccupation. Preoccupation is a distraction. Because we can't figure some shit out, I'm just going to distract myself to keep myself busy to survive and to manipulate to my benefit. We totally lost ourselves in creating a secular security, economic security, to replace the spiritual one we had lost. The question of why we are alive, of what was actually going on here spiritually, was slowly pushed aside and repressed altogether. Working to establish a more comfortable style of survival has grown to feel complete in and of itself as a reason to live. We've gradually, methodically forgotten our original question. We've forgotten that we still don't know what we're surviving for, and this is what we're coming, and this is what we are now starting to realize. In the ending of the 20th century is we've been so distracted and preoccupied on just surviving. We forgot the reason why we even exist, what God really is. And this is where we are now. Now that was last year was the ending of the age of the Pisces, the age of the illusion. We have been coming out of the illusion of what our ancestors in the past have created. The illusion of let's distract ourselves since we don't know the answer of God. We don't know the answer of the existence of mankind, the existence of everything. Now with the age of the Aquarius that we have entered into, I think the end of last year or beginning of this year, the end of last year, the age of Aquarius. The age of Aquarius is everything coming to light, the truth, the technology, um, technology. What word am I looking for? Technology existence or some shit. Like everything's taken over. The illusion, the veil of the illusion is being lifted. Truth is coming out, and that's what's been happening since when? What, last year or so? Since Trump been in office, the truth has been coming to light about everything. Starting to. Out the window far below, I could see a large city. Judging from our flight path, I suspected it was Orlando, Florida. I was struck by the geometric outline of streets and avenues, the planned and the ordered configuration of what humans had built. I looked over at Dobson. His eyes were closed and he appeared to be asleep. For an hour he had told me more about the second insight. Then our lunch had arrived and we had eaten, and I had told him about Charlene and why I had decided to come to Peru. Afterward, I wanted to only gaze out the window at the cloud formations and consider what he had said. So what do you think? He asked suddenly, looking sleepily over at me. Have you grasped the second insight? I'm not sure. He nodded towards the passengers. Do you feel as if you have clear perspective of the human world? Do you see how preoccupied everyone has been? This perspective explains a lot. How many people do you know are obsessed with their work? This is important. Okay, hold on. Do you feel as if you have a clearer perspective on the human world? Do you see how preoccupied everyone has been? This perspective explains a lot. How many people do you know who are obsessed with the work, who are type A or have stress related diseases, and who can't slow down? They can't slow down because they use their routine to distract themselves, to reduce life to only its practical considerations. And they do this to avoid recalling how uncertain they are about why they live. Let me reread that, because that's deep. He nodded toward the other passengers. Do you feel as if you have clear perspective on the human world? Do you see how preoccupied everyone has been? This perspective explains a lot. How many people do you know who are obsessed with their work, who are type A or have stress-related diseases, and who can't slow down? They can't slow down because they use the routine to distract themselves, to reduce life to only its practical considerations. And they do this to avoid recalling how uncertain they are about why they live. Don't you find yourself doing that? When you can't figure shit out, when you're trying to not think about something, not think about somebody you love, not think about a heartbreak, or not think about the stresses, your financial stresses, or not think about how your kids are driving you crazy. So you distract yourself by overworking yourself at work because you're not trying to deal with the reality, or overeating because you're not trying to deal with the pain, or overworking out because you're distracting yourself or something. So that's what he's saying. Since the modern age, we have been preoccupying ourselves, distracting ourselves because we don't know the truth. We don't even know why we exist. And so instead of trying to figure it out, we just distracting ourselves. The second insight extends our consciousness of historical time, he added. It shows us how to obscure culture not just from the perspective of our own lifetimes, but from the perspective of a whole millennium. It reveals our preoccupation to us and so lifts us above it. You have just experienced this longer history. You now live in a longer now. When you look at the human world now, You should be able to clearly see the obsessiveness, the intense preoccupation with economic progress. Let me reread that because I was outlining. Okay, so the second insight extends our consciousness of historical time, he added. It shows us how to obscure, no, it shows us how to observe culture not just from the perspective of our own lifetimes, but from the perspective of a whole millennium. It reveals our preoccupation to us and so lifts us above it. You have just experienced this longer history, and I guess in regards to how he explained history, um, you now live in a longer now. When you look at the human world now, you should be able to clearly see the obsessiveness, the intense preoccupation with economic progress. People are so obsessed about financially surviving, of course, because money technically makes the world go around. You can't live without money. You can't live without working to make money, because if you do, you're going to be out in the streets or you're going to be living up under somebody, you know? No freedom whatsoever. But what's wrong with that? I protested. It's what made Western civilization great. He laughed loudly. Of course, you're right. No one's saying it was wrong. In fact, the manuscript says the preoccupation was necessary development as stage in human evolution. Now, however, we've spent enough time settling into the world. It's time now to wake up from the preoccupation and reconsider our original question. What's behind life on this planet? Why are we really here? And this is where we are in life right now. For real. At least I see it. If you don't, open your fucking eyes. We are questioning what's behind life on this planet. Why are we really here? We are getting tired and restless of always having to work, always have to slave after the dollar, always having to slave to survive. We're getting tired of it. We're like, why are we here? What is the reason of existence? Because I'm tired of slaving. I'm tired of settling. I look at him for a long time. Then, okay. I looked at him for a long time, then asked, "Do you think the other insights explain his purpose?" Dobson cocked his head. "I think it's worth the look. I just hope no one destroys the rest of the manuscript before we have a chance to find out. How could the Peruvian government think they could destroy an important artifact and get away with it?" I asked. "They would do it covertly," he replied. "The official line is that the manuscript doesn't exist at all. I would think the scientific community would be up in arms." He looked at me with an expression of resolve. "We are. That's why I'm returning to Peru. I represent 10 prominent scientists, all of whom demand that the original manuscript be made public. I sent a letter to the relevant department heads within the Peruvian government, telling them that I was coming and that I expected cooperation." So this man told the government, this is the same government who's trying to keep this manuscript silent, that he's coming for the manuscript, because that makes a little fucking sense. I see. I wonder how they will respond. Exactly. What a great question. I wonder how they will respond. Probably with denials, but at least it will be an official start. He turned away deep in thought, and then I stared out the window again. As I looked down, it dawned on me that the airplane on which we were riding contained within its technology 4 centuries of progress. We had learned so much about manipulating the resources we have found on the earth. How many people, I mused, how many generations did it take to create the products and the understanding that enabled this airplane to come into being? How many spent their whole lives focused on one tiny aspect, one small step, without ever lifting their heads from their preoccupation? So that's why he says that the manuscript says that the preoccupation error was important, because of the preoccupation states, because people was preoccupying their time and their attention on surviving, on survival, on things, on work, on creating things, it is why the reason why we have what we have today. So that era was important. Suddenly, in that instant, the span of history Dobson and I had been discussing seemed to integrate fully into my consciousness. I could see, oh no, that's kind of important. When you learn your history and you think about it, things are starting to make sense. Suddenly, in that instant, the span of history Dobson and I had been discussing seemed to integrate fully into my consciousness. I could see the millennium clearly, as though it was part of my life history. 1,000 years ago, we had lived in a world where God and human spirituality were clearly defined, and then we had lost it, or better yet, we had decided there was more to the story. Accordingly, we had sent explorers out to discover the real truth and to report back. And when they had taken too long, we have become preoccupied with a new secular purpose, one of settling into the world and making ourselves more comfortable. Sounds about white. Sorry. I'm just saying. And settle we discovered, hold on. And settled we had. We discovered that metallic ores could be melted down and fashioned into all kinds of gadgets. We invented we invented power. We invented sources of power. First steam, then gas, and then electricity and fission. We systemized farming, mass production, and now commanded huge stores of material goods and vast networks of distribution, propelling it all with the call to progress, the desire of the individual to provide his own security, his own purpose while he was waiting for the truth. Come. Propelling it all propelling it all with the call to focus to the Lord. Propelling it all was the call to progress, the desire of the individual to provide his own security, his own purpose while he was waiting for the truth. We had decided to create a more comfortable and pleasurable life for ourselves and our children, and in a mere 400 years, our preoccupation had created a human world where all the comforts of life could now be produced. The problem was that our focus, our obsessive drive to conquer nature and make ourselves more comfortable, had left the natural systems of the planet polluted and on the verge of collapse. We couldn't go on this way. Remember during the time, I don't know which year it was, but I think it was, it was the past, quite a few, like past presidents, Trump, Obama, before him, where the scientists were complaining that, like, the global warming, what was the other one? The other stuff that was happening with nature, because we was polluting this earth and taking too much from it or whatever, we was fucking it up. I forgot the word they was using. Excuse me, I'm kind of tired. Dobson was right, and so because the scientists were bringing all this awareness of what's going on with this earth to awareness, we are realizing because we were so preoccupied with surviving and taking the natural resources from the earth, we was polluting the earth. So now we are waking up to realize there's changes that need to be happening. So because of that, it's interesting how we come across a virus last year that's killing off so many people. Okay, hello. So when you're killing off so many people, you are depopulating this earth, right? Because they were assuming that because we're overpopulated is the reason why there's too much pollution. Now they found ways to kill off a lot of people naturally, and then the next step was the you know, which also has been killing people or eventually or something else. I don't know. Let's see what happens. Um, Dobson was right. The second insight did make our new awareness seem inevitable. We were reaching a climax in our cultural purpose. We were accomplishing what we had collectively decided to do, and as this happened, our preoccupation was breaking down. The second insight did make our new awareness seem inevitable. We were reaching a climax in our cultural purpose. We were accomplishing what we had collectively decided to do, and as this happened, our preoccupation was breaking down and we were waking up to something else. I could almost see the momentum of the modern age slowing as we approached the end of the millennium. 400 years ago, 400 years 400-year-old obsession had been completed. We had created means of material security, and now we seem to be ready, poised, in fact, to find out why we had done it. Mm. In the faces of the passengers around me, I could see evidence of the preoccupation, but also I detected brief glimpses of awareness. How many, I wondered, had already noticed the coincidences? The plane tilted forward and began to its descent as the flight attendant announced that we would be landing soon in Lima. I gave Dobson the name of my hotel and asked where he was staying. He gave me the name of his hotel and said it was only a couple miles from mine. What is your plan? I asked. I've been thinking about that. He replied, the first thing I guess is to visit the American embassy and tell them why I'm here for just for the record. Good idea. After that, I'm going to speak with as many Peruvian scientists as I can. The scientists at the University of Lima have already told me that they have no knowledge of the manuscript, but there are other scientists who are working at various ruins who may be willing to talk. What about you? What are your plans? I have none, I replied. Do you mind if I tag along? Not at all. I was going to suggest it. Interesting. Now, James, the main character, he sporadically, impulsively decides to take a trip to Peru about this manuscript. No plans, no ideas, don't know nobody, don't know nothing, and just follows his intuition. He meets the first person that helps him along this journey to the second insight on the plane, and the same person who has been to Peru before and has the gist of things invites him to tag along. See how everything is flowing? When life flows, it lets you know that you are going in the right direction. That means you are following your intuition and you are following the coincidences, and that's helping you along your journey. When you're on the right path, everything just flows. After the plane landed, we picked up our luggage and agreed to meet later at Dobson's hotel. I walked outside and hailed a taxi in the fading twilight. The air was dry and the wind very brisk. As my cab drove away, I noticed another taxi pull out quickly behind us, then lag behind in the traffic. It stayed with us through several turns, and I could make out a lone figure in the back. A rush of nervousness filled my stomach. I asked the driver, who could speak English, not to go directly to the hotel, but to drive around for a while. I told him I was interested in sightseeing. He complied without comments. The taxi followed. What was this all about? When we arrived at my hotel, I told the driver to stay in the car. Then I opened my door and pretended to be paying the fare. The taxi following behind pulled up to the curb some distance away, and the man stepped out and walked slowly toward the hotel entrance. I jumped back into the vehicle and shut the door and telling the cabby to drive on. As we sped away, the man walked into the street and watched us until we were out of sight. I could see my driver's face in the rearview mirror. He was watching me closely, his expression tense. Sorry about this, I said. I've decided to change accommodations. I struggled to smile, then gave him the name of Dobson's Hotel. Although part of me wanted to go straight to the airport and take the first plane back to the United States. That's fear. Something strange was happening. He noticed somebody was following him, knowing that he's in a complete different continent, not knowing anybody or anything. Just knowing that his friend Charlene was telling him, and Dobson was telling him, nobody wants anybody to know about this manuscript. And with his friend Charlene, somebody stole her briefcase thinking that the manuscript or copies of the manuscript was in there. So he's seeing that danger follows people, and they're people who are wanting to learn about this manuscript. So when he knows that somebody was following him, fear set in. But did he let fear take control? Let's see. A half block short of our destination, I had the driver pull over. Wait here, I told him. I'll be right back. The streets were filled with people, mostly native Peruvians, but here and there I passed some Americans and Europeans. Something about seeing the tourists made me feel safer. When I was within 50 yards of the hotel, I stopped. Something wasn't right. Suddenly, as I watched, gunshots rang out and screams filled the air. The crowd in front of me flung themselves to the ground, opening up my view down the sidewalk. Dobson was running toward me, wide-eyed, panicked. Figures behind him pursued. One fired his gun into the air and ordered Dobson to halt. Danger follows people who's asking about this manuscript. As he ran closer, Dobson strained to focus, then recognized me. Run, he yelled. For God's sakes, run! I turned and ran down an alley in terror. Ahead was a vertical board fence 6 feet high, blocking my way. When I reached it, I leaped as high as I could, catching the top of the boards with my hands, flinging my right leg over the top. As I pulled my left leg over and dropped to the other side, I looked back down the alley. Dobson was running desperately. More shots were fired. He stumbled and fell. I continued to run blindly, leaping piles of trash and stacks of cardboard boxes. For a moment, I thought I heard footsteps behind me, but I didn't dare to look behind. Ahead, the alley ran into the next street, which was also crowded with people, seemingly unalarmed. As I entered the street, I dared to glance to my rear, my heart pounding. No one was there. I walked hurriedly down the sidewalk to the right, trying to fade into the crowd. Why did Dobson run? I asked myself. Was he killed? Wait a minute, someone said in loud. Oh, wait a minute. Someone said in a loud whisper from behind my left shoulder. I started to run, but he reached out and grabbed my arm. Please, wait a minute, he said again. I saw what happened. I'm trying to help you. Who are you? I asked, trembling. I'm Wilson James, he said. I'll later explain. Right now, we have to get out of these streets. His intuition was telling him something that wasn't right. And something wasn't right. This man is very intuitive. Something about his voice and demeanor calmed my panic. Remember what I was saying earlier? Whatever your body is telling you is your intuition. So before, his body was feeling fearful out of no reason, like something bad was about to happen. A moment later, something bad happened. Now he come across this person out of nowhere, this Wilson James. Now he's feeling calm. His body, his intuition is telling him this is okay. Something about his voice and demeanor calmed my panic. As I decided to follow him, we walked up the street and into a leather goods store. He nodded to a man behind the counter and led me to a musty spare room in the back. He shut the door and closed the curtains. He was a man in his 60s, although he seemed much younger. A sparkle in his eyes or something. His skin was dark brown and his hair was black. He looked of Peruvian descent, but the English he spoke sounded almost American. He wore a bright blue t-shirt and jeans. You'll be safe here for a while, he said. Why are they chasing you? I didn't respond. You hear about the manuscript, aren't you? He asked. Another complete stranger talking about the manuscript out of nowhere. Coincidence? How did you know about that? I guess the man you're with is here for that reason too. Yes, his name is Dobson. How did you know there were two of us? I have a room over the alley. I was looking out the window as they were chasing you. Did they shoot Dobson? I asked, terrified by what I might hear. In reply, I don't know, he said. I couldn't tell, but once I saw you had escaped, I ran down the back steps to head you off. I thought perhaps I could help. Why? For an instant, he looked at me as though he was uncertain how to answer my question. Then his expression changed to one of warmth. You won't understand this, but I was standing there at the window and thoughts about an old friend came to me. He's dead now. Thoughts of an old friend came to me. He's dead now. He thought people should know about the manuscripts. When I saw what was happening in the alley, I felt I should help you. Because this situation made him think about his friend who was after the manuscript, he thought to help this stranger. What happened to the main character when he heard Dobson when he woke up from the turbulence, goes to the restroom, he sees a guy talking to the flight attendant. The guy reminded him of somebody he knew. They lock eyes. He goes to the restroom, comes back out, and he overhears the guy talk about the manuscript. Coincidence. When somebody, a complete stranger, when somebody reminds you of somebody, that's a coincidence. That's a sign. He was right. I didn't understand it, but I had a feeling he was being absolutely truthful with me. I was about to ask another question when he spoke again. So his feelings, his intuition was telling him he was being absolutely truthful. We can talk about this later, he said. I think we'd better move to a safer place. Wait a minute, Wilson, I said. I just want to find a way back to the States. How can I do this? Call me Will, he replied. I don't think you should try the airport. Not yet. If they're still looking for you, they will be checking there. I have some friends who live out of town. They will hide you. There are several other ways out of the country you can choose. When you're ready, they will show you where to go. So, after this life-threatening situation, he runs across somebody who was willing to help him, all because he reminded him of his friend who was after the manuscript. And this stranger, Wilson, is offering him safe passage to keep safe. Look how the universe, how everything just flows. And I'm not saying when you follow your intuition, I'm not saying when you are connected with the universe, everything is great. No. Life is still all about ups and downs, but it's just about if you are in flow with the universe, if you are in flow with yourself, that no matter what is happening, you are always divinely protected, divinely loved, divinely directed, divinely guided, and divinely protected. And everything happens in divine timing. He opened the door to the room and checked inside the shop, then walked outside and checked the street. When he returned, he motioned for me to follow. We walked down the street to a blue Jeep that Will pointed out. As we got in, I noticed that the back seat was carefully packed with foodstuff and tents and satchels as if for an extended trip. We rode in silence. And mind you, this man's Jeep was ready for a trip. Like, clearly he was about to go somewhere, and his Jeep was already prepared. You ain't gotta wait. You ain't gotta go to the grocery store. Everything's already prepared. Divine timing. We rode in silence. I leaned back in the passenger seat and tried to think. My stomach was knotted with fear. I had never expected this. What if I had been arrested and thrown into a Peruvian jail or killed outright? I had to size up my situation. I had no clothes, but I did have money and one credit card, and for some reason I trusted Will. What had you and who was it, Dobson, done to get those people after you? Will asked suddenly. Nothing that I know of, I replied. I met Dobson on the airplane. He's an historian, and he was coming down here to investigate the manuscript officially. He represents a group of other scientists. Will looked surprised. Did the government know he was coming? Yes, he had written certain government officials that he wanted cooperation. I can't believe they tried to arrest him. He didn't even have his copies with him. He has copies of the manuscript. Only the first two only the first two insights. I had no idea there were copies in the United States. Where did he get them? On an on an earlier trip, he had told a certain priest knew of the manuscript. He couldn't find them. He couldn't find him, but he found the copies hidden behind the house. Will looked sad. Jose? Who? I asked. He said, the friend I told you about, the one who was killed. He was the he was adamant that as many people as possible hear about the manuscript. What happened to him? He was murdered. He don't We don't know by whom. His body was found in the forest miles from his house, but I have to think it was his enemies. The government? Certain people in the government or in the church. His church would go that far? Perhaps the church is secretly against the manuscript. There are a few priests who understand the document and advocate it covertly, but they must be very careful. Jose talked of it openly to anyone who would listen, who wanted to know. I warned him for months before his death to be more subtle, to stop giving copies to anyone who came along. He told me he was doing what he must. He told me he was doing what he knew he must. Oh, how much time pages we got one? Okay, we're almost done because I'm tired. when when was the manuscript first discovered? I asked. It was first translated 3 years ago, but no one knows when it was first discovered. The original floated around for years. We think among the Indians until it was found by Jose. He alone managed to get it translated. Of course, once the church found out what the manuscript said, they tried to suppress it totally. Now, all we have are copies. We think they destroyed the original. Will had driven east out of town, and he was riding on a narrow 2-lane road through a heavily irrigated area. We passed several small plank dwellings and then a large pasture with expensive fencing. Did Dobson tell you about the first two insights? Will asked. He told me about the second insight, I replied. I have a friend who told me about the first. She talked to a priest at another time, to Jose, I guess. Do you understand these two insights? I think so. Do you understand that chance encounters often have a deeper meaning? That's why I was highlighting every time a stranger came about, talking about a manuscript. Do you understand that chance encounters often have a deeper meaning? It seems, I said, like this whole trip has been one coincidental event after another. Already. That begins to happen once you be hold on. That begins to happen once you become alert and connected with the energy, connected with the universe. Connected, Will smiled. That's something mentioned further in the manuscript. I'd like to hear about it, I said. Let's talk about it later, he said, indicating with a nod that he was turning the vehicle into a gravel driveway. 100 feet ahead was a modest wood frame house. Will pulled up beneath a large tree to the right of the house and stopped. My friend works for the owner of a large farming estate who owns much of the land in this area, he said, and provides this house. The man is very powerful and secretly supportive of the manuscript. You'll be safe here. A porch light flicked on, and a short, squat man who appeared to be a native Peruvian rushed out and smiling broadly and saying something enthusiastically in Spanish. When he reached the jeep, he patted Will on the back through the open window and glanced pleasantly over at me. Will asked him to speak in English, then introduced us. He needs a little help. You see, the main character still has not said his name. So I'm just going to call him James, the author's name, because he hasn't said his name. So this is like a first-person adventure, first-person reading book of the author. Okay. He needs a little help, Will said to this man. He wants to return to the States, but we'll have to be very careful. I guess I'm going to leave him with you. The man was looking closely at Will. You're about to go after the ninth insight again, aren't you? He asked. Yes, Will said, getting out of the jeep. I opened my door and walked around the vehicle. Will and his friend were strolling toward the house, having a conversation I couldn't hear. As I walked up, the man said, I will start the preparations, then walked away. Will turned to me. What did he mean, I asked, when he questioned you about a ninth insight? There is part of the manuscript that has never been found. There were 8 insights with the original text, but one more insight, the ninth, was mentioned there. Many people have been searching for it. Do you not know where it is? No, not really. Then how are you going to find it? Will smiled. The same way Jose found the original 8. The same way you found the first 2. And then ran into me. If one connects and builds up enough energy, then coincidental events begin to happen consistently. When you connect your energy to something, when you connect your energy to the universe, coincidental events will happen that will guide you in the right direction towards whatever you're looking for. Then how are you going to find it? The same way Jose found the original 8, the same way you found out about the first 2, then ran into me. If one connect and build up enough energy, then coincidental events begin to happen consistently. Tell me how to do that, I said. Which insight is that? Will looked at me as if assessing my level of understanding. How to connect is not just one insight, it's all of them. Remember, in the second insight, where it describes how explorers would be sent out into the world utilizing the scientific method to discover the meaning of human life on this planet, but they would not return right away. I didn't even read that right. How to connect is not just one insight, it's all of them. Remember, in the second insight, where it describes how explorers would be sent out into the world utilizing the scientific method to discover the meaning of human life on this planet, but they would not return right away. It's like those as written as questions, but it doesn't sound like questions. Yes. Well, the remainder of the insights represent the answers finally coming. Well, the remainder of the insights represents the answers finally coming back. Okay, now the answers are coming back. These insights are the answers to all of mankind's questions, at least in the modern age questions. What is the meaning of humanity? In the modern age, scientific sent out explorers to figure out the meaning of humanity, to figure out the meaning of God or who is God. And those explorers never came back, especially not come back with no answers. And he's saying now with this manuscript, the insights is coming back with the answers. But they aren't just coming back from institutional science. The answers I'm talking about are coming from many different areas of inquiry. The findings of physics, psychology, mysticism, and religion are all coming together into a new synthesis based on a perception of coincidences. To find the answers is to go along to perception, to understanding the coincidences that occurs. We're learning the details of what the coincidences mean. Fuck my outlining. How they work, and as we do, we're constructing a whole new view of life, insight by insight. So when you follow these intuitions, when you follow the coincidences, when you learn these and follow these insights, they're building up to the answers that we are seeking. You just gotta follow it through. Go with the flow. We're learning the details of the coincidences, what the coincidences mean and how they work, and as we do, we're constructing a whole new view of life, insight by insight. Then I want to hear about each insight. I said, can you explain them to me before you go? I found out it doesn't work that way. You must discover each one of them in a different way. How? It just happens. It wouldn't work for me to just tell you. You might have the information about each of them, but you wouldn't have the insights. You have to discover them in the course of your own life. That's just like the Bible. You can read the Bible, right? And you can understand the Bible, but if you don't experience those things in your own life, in your own journey, you will never really understand it. You will never really understand it. That's why when people are going through shit, sometimes they don't even like to tell people, because it's like, you've never gone through it, you will never understand. So that's what they're saying about this manuscript, about the insights. Will is saying, I can tell you all the insights, but you will never understand, because you have to experience it. You have to let the insights come to you, and you experience them all for you to truly understand these insights. We stared at each other in silence. Will smiled. Talking with him made me feel incredibly alive. That's your intuition, your gut telling you this is good. You're going in the right direction. Why are you going after the ninth insight now? I asked. It's the right time. I have been a guide here. I have been a guide. My throat is dry. Okay. It's the right time. I have been a guide here, and I know the terrain, and I understand all 8 insights. When I was at my window over the alley thinking of Joe, I had already decided to go north one more time. Divine timing. Will was about to go forth to search for the ninth insight, and then he sees what James is going through, the main character, and he saves him. Come to find out, y'all both about to figure out the manuscript. Coincidence? Yes. Okay. When I was at my window over the valley thinking of Jose, I had already decided to go north one more time. The ninth insight is out there. I know it, and I'm not getting any younger. Besides, I've envisioned myself finding it and achieving what it says. I know it. I know it is most important. I know it is the most important of the insights. It puts all the others into perspective and gives us the true purpose of life. He paused suddenly, looking serious. So, Will strongly believes that this ninth insight puts all the other previous insights all together to make it make sense. He strongly feels this. He felt, even though he don't know, he strongly feels this, and he's willing to go figure it out, to find those answers. That's faith, determination, willpower, ambition, and faith. Intuition. I had already decided to go north one more time. The ninth insight is out there. I know it, and I'm not getting any younger. Besides, I've envisioned myself finding it. I envisioned myself finding it and achieving what it says. I know it is the most important of the insights. He knows without even knowing. It puts all the others into perspective and gives us the true purpose of life. He paused suddenly, looking serious. I would have left 30 minutes earlier, but I had this nagging feeling that I had forgotten something. He paused again. That's precisely when you showed up. So, everything happens for a reason. If you're feeling like, you are running behind, if you're running late, if you think you forgot something, that's your intuition distracting you or slowing you down, because something is meant to happen that's supposed to correspond with what you got going on. So when shit happens unexpectedly, don't get mad, just go with the flow. I would have left 30 minutes earlier, but I had this nagging feeling that I had forgotten something. That's precisely when you showed up. We looked at each other for a long time. You think I'm supposed to go with you? I asked. What do you think? I don't know, I said, unsure of myself. I felt confused. The story of my Peruvian trip was flashing before my eyes. Charlene, Dobson, now Will. I had come to Peru because of a mild curiosity, and now found myself in hiding, an unwitting fugitive who didn't even know who his pursuers were. The strangest thing of all was that at this moment, instead of being terrified, totally panicked, I found myself in a state of excitement. So instead of him letting fear take control, I should have I should have been summoning all of my wits and instincts to find a way home, but what I really wanted to do was to go with Will into what would undoubtedly be more danger. As I considered my options, I realized that in reality I had no choice. The second insight had ended my possibility of going back to my old preoccupations. If I was going to stay aware, I had to go forward. I plan to spend the night, Will said, so you have until tomorrow morning to decide. I've already decided, I told him. I want to go. So instead of him letting his fears, because I mean, that's a lot to fear. Your life is in danger in a complete different country, continent you ain't never been to, you don't know nothing about something you don't even know, with no plans, no nothing. Yeah, anybody would have been feared and would have took their ass back home. But now he with strangers, keep meeting strangers. And even though he's like, this is a stranger I know nothing about, I feel comfortable. I feel calm. And they know something that I'm looking for. So with him following these coincidences, him following his intuition, him following and just going with the flow, with not even knowing, he is being divinely guided, divinely protected, and divinely directed. Everything happening in divine timing. James did not let fear take control, because, I mean, that's obviously anybody would have been fearful. Like, bitch, he's got these government officials shooting at us. They didn't even try to stop us and arrest us, or go or chase after us and arrest us. They was shooting at us. Dobson. Yeah, that's some extra shit. Anybody else would be like, I gotta go. Now you come across another stranger, and for some reason, intuitively, you trusted him. And come to find out, this man is about the manuscript too, knows all the insights, and is going after the last insight, which the last insight will give clarification over everything, and to tell us what's next, to give us the answer about about the the perspective about the true purpose of life. Bruh, all your answers right there in this person who is willing to let you tag along to learn everything, to figure everything out. Like, as crazy as this shit's happening, he's still getting his answers and his wishes fulfilled and answered and guided. He didn't go searching for any of this. It all came to him. He set his intentions towards something. And when he set his intentions towards something and realized, okay, this is the way to go because everything was falling in line, everything just fell in line. He didn't have a plan. He didn't have the interest to anything. He didn't know anybody. He didn't know this continent, this country. He didn't know nothing. He just went with the flow, follow his intuitions, and follow these coincidences, and it's all leading him in the right direction. Even through the terror, he's still moving forward, and it's still getting all answered. Like, that's just how life is. Like, for instance, just like him, he's at a point of his life where he's restless, he's tired. He's been working he's been working in this profession, realizing, okay, he's bored, thinking that he can help children get through their trauma, realizing it seemed like they got through their trauma, but really they didn't. They're still traumatized. And he's like, there's more to life than what I'm experiencing. I want more out of life. It's like and then he goes to his grandfather's cabin like he's ready to retire. Which I don't. He never tells his age, but he doesn't sound like he's the age of retirement. He sound like how the story went and unfolded. He sound like he's in his 30s somewhere, and uh, come across his friend out of nowhere. She tells him about this manuscript that it gives the answers up to existence, human existence. There's, at first he was skeptical. Now he's intrigued. Now he's like, all right, I'm interested. God was like, bet, let me help you. Everything just unfolded naturally, divinely guided, divinely directed, divinely protected, all in divine timing. Everything fit in like pieces of puzzles, helping him. Like these puzzle pieces are his stepping stones, and everything's fitting together in this big puzzle piece. That's how life is. That's how my life has been. That's how, I mean, if you paid attention, that's how your life has been. Just wake up and be aware of the coincidences. Follow your intuition and just go with the flow. I'm tired. B. Thank you for tuning in. That was chapter 2. Tomorrow I'll be doing the earth signs. And then tomorrow night, I'll be doing chapter 3 in the book club. Good night, y'all. Peace. Not the earth sign. I showed this as the earth sign work. Air signs.